Every morning it starts again. The quiet courtroom in your head opens before your eyes do. Should I wake up now or wait for the next alarm? Do I really need to train today? Maybe I'll start that project tomorrow when I feel more ready. And just like that, you're sitting at the negotiation table with yourself, trying to convince the part of you that made the plan that the part of you that doesn't feel like it deserves a say. This isn't decision-making, it's decision warfare, and you're losing ground every single day. Because here's what most people miss. Every time you negotiate with yourself, every time you entertain that maybe, you weaken the promise you made. You teach yourself that your word, your commitment, your declared intention is just a suggestion, open to revision whenever discomfort shows up. And over time, this doesn't just cost you progress, it costs you something deeper. It costs you self-trust, the foundation of everything else. The Stoics understood that inner conflict is the root of suffering. They knew that a divided mind is a defeated mind. And today, we're going to explore what happens when you finally stop bargaining, when you silence the courtroom, when you become the kind of person who decides once and moves. Because that shift, that decision to stop negotiating with yourself, that's where everything changes. The negotiation tax you don't see. Let's talk about what you're actually losing. Every negotiation with yourself, whether you win or lose, costs energy, mental, emotional, spiritual energy that you'll never get back. Think about it. You set the alarm for 5 a.m. because you know early mornings give you space to think, to build, to become. But when it goes off, that voice starts. You only slept 6 hours. You can start tomorrow. One day won't make a difference. And now you're in a debate, a full internal trial about something you already decided hours ago. You're relitigating a closed case. And even if you get up, even if you win that particular battle, you've spent crucial energy just getting to the starting line. Energy that could have gone into the work itself. This is what people don't calculate. They think, I'll just decide in the moment. But every moment you spend deciding is a moment you're not doing. You're burning fuel before the engine even starts. And it compounds, because tomorrow morning, the negotiation starts again. Maybe you lose that one. And now you've taught yourself that the alarm is optional, that your plans are flexible, that your word to yourself is negotiable. And the next decision gets harder, not easier, because now you have evidence that you don't follow through, that you can't be trusted, that when things get uncomfortable, you fold. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "At dawn, when you have trouble getting out of bed, tell yourself, I have to go to work. As a human being, what do I have to complain of if I'm going to do what I was born for, the things I was brought into the world to do?" He wasn't talking to someone else. He was reminding himself, because even the Emperor of Rome had to fight this battle. The negotiation tax isn't just about time, it's about identity. Every time you debate with yourself, you're reinforcing a story. I'm the kind of person who needs to feel like it. I'm someone who struggles with consistency. I can't just do things. I have to want to do them first. And that story becomes your reality. Not because it's true, but because you keep proving it to yourself through these tiny courtroom sessions, where the prosecution is fear, and the defense is your future. And fear almost always has better evidence. It's louder, more immediate, more convincing in the moment. But here's what changes everything. When you stop negotiating, you stop collecting that evidence. You stop building the case against yourself. The moment you draw the line, there's a shift that happens, subtle but total. It's not about motivation. It's not about feeling strong. It's about drawing a line so clear that negotiation doesn't even begin. You decide that certain things are no longer up for debate. The morning routine, Non-negotiable. The training session, already decided. The work block. It's happening. Not because you feel like it, but because it's who you've become. This is where most people misunderstand discipline. They think it's about forcing yourself to do hard things. But that's still negotiation, just with more willpower. Real discipline is when the conversation doesn't start when the alarm goes off. And you move. Not because you convinced yourself, not because you won some inner argument, but because that's what you do now. There's no debate. Epictetus taught his students, first say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. That sequence matters. First, you define it. Then you execute. No trial, no back and forth, no internal democracy. You declared it. Now you honor it. And in that space between declaration and execution, that's where you build something rare. You build self-trust. The kind of trust that doesn't need evidence, doesn't need motivation, doesn't need perfect conditions, because it's already been decided. You gave yourself an order, and you followed it. Not sometime later, not when it felt right, immediately, automatically, without debate. When you stop negotiating, you remove the weight. Suddenly your mornings are lighter, because you're not carrying the burden of decision fatigue. You already decided last night, or last week, or when you designed your life. And now you just move like water, like breath, like something natural. And when people watch you, they'll think you're built different. They'll say, you have discipline. But really, you just stopped arguing with yourself. You made the hard choice once, and now you're living in the echo of that choice. What fills the space? Here's what people fear when they first hear this. They think, if I stop negotiating, won't I become rigid? Won't I lose my flexibility, my ability to adapt? But that's not what happens at all. Because when you remove the constant background noise of negotiation, when you free up all that energy you were spending on internal debate, something else moves in. Clarity, focus, presence. You actually become more adaptable, not less. Because you're no longer paralyzed by choice. You're no longer stuck in the gap between intention and action. You're moving. And when you're moving, you can adjust. But when you're negotiating, you're frozen. Let me give you a real example. You've committed to reading 30 minutes every morning before work. The negotiation version of you wakes up and immediately starts the trial. I'm tired. I have emails piling up. I'll read tonight instead. And even if you do read, those 30 minutes are shallow, because half your mind is still debating whether you should be doing this. The non-negotiating version? You wake up, you make coffee, you sit down, you read. 30 minutes pass. You move on with your day. And in that simplicity, you actually absorbed more. You were present, not performing, not justifying, just doing. Carl Jung said, I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become. And the choosing happens in these moments. When you eliminate negotiation, you're not becoming someone who never feels resistance. You're becoming someone who moves through it, who doesn't need permission from their feelings to honor their commitments. That's the identity shift. That's what fills the space where negotiation used to live. Think about the people you respect, the ones who seem unshakable, steady, consistent. What do they have in common? They don't seem to struggle with the things everyone else struggles with. Not because they're superhuman, but because they've removed the option to negotiate. They've made certain decisions permanent, and now they just execute. This creates a kind of momentum where action becomes your default state, not something you have to pump yourself up for. You're no longer starting from zero every day. You're already in motion, already building, already proving to yourself that your word means something. The compound effect of following through. Let's talk about what happens over time, because this isn't just about one morning or one workout. This is about what accumulates when you consistently show up without negotiation. When you prove to yourself day after day that you do what you say you're going to do. Something shifts in your nervous system. You start to trust yourself, not in some abstract way, but in a deep biological way. Your body stops producing the stress response that comes from uncertainty, from inconsistency. You become calmer, not because life got easier, but because you know you'll handle it. Every time you follow through without negotiation, you're depositing into an account of self-trust, and that account pays interest. People talk about confidence like it's something you can fake or affirm your way into. But real confidence, the kind that doesn't crumble under pressure, comes from evidence. It comes from a history of following through. When you stop negotiating, you start building that history. You become someone who knows without question that when you say you're going to do something, you do it. This affects everything, not just your morning routine. When you've trained yourself to honor commitments to yourself, you become better at honoring commitments to others. You show up on time. You follow through on promises. You don't make excuses, because you've eliminated excuses in your private world. And that private discipline bleeds into your public presence. People feel it. They may not know why, but they trust you more. They lean on you more. They follow your lead, not because you told them to, but because you've become someone who doesn't need to be told. You just do. Seneca once wrote, "Most powerful is he who has himself in his own power." That power starts with eliminating negotiation. Because when you control the courtroom, when you refuse to entertain every doubt, every excuse, every impulse, you become ungovernable, not by others, but by your own weakness. And that's a different kind of freedom. It's not the freedom to do whatever you want, whenever you want. It's the freedom to become who you said you would, without being dragged back by the part of you that's always looking for the exit. The dark side of constant negotiation. Let's be honest about what you're really doing when you negotiate with yourself. Every morning, you're not being flexible or kind or balanced. You're betraying yourself in small, quiet ways that you've convinced yourself don't matter. But they do matter, because betrayal compounds. Whether it's big or small, whether anyone else knows or not, your subconscious is keeping score. And every time you break a promise to yourself, every time you renegotiate what you already committed to, you're teaching yourself that you're not someone who can be counted on. This creates a kind of internal instability where you can't fully relax, because deep down, you don't trust yourself to do what you say. You might perform for others. You might meet external deadlines. But with yourself, you're constantly breaking contracts, and that creates shame. Not the loud, obvious kind, but the quiet, gnawing kind that makes you feel like you're not living up to your potential. And you're not, because you're spending your potential negotiating instead of building. Think about the opportunities you've missed, not because you didn't have the skill or the time, but because when the moment came to act, you opened up the negotiation table. Maybe I'm not ready. What if it doesn't work? I should wait until I'm more prepared. And by the time you finished deliberating, the moment passed. Someone else took it. Someone who didn't need to negotiate, who just moved. And you told yourself it wasn't meant to be. But that's not true. It was meant to be. You just talked yourself out of it. Plato said, "The first and greatest victory is to conquer yourself." And you can't conquer yourself if you're constantly making deals with the part of you that wants comfort, that wants easy, that wants to stay small. Every negotiation is a micro-surrender, and over time, those micro-surrenders become your life. You look up one day and realize you've been negotiating for so long, you forgot what it feels like to just decide and move, without permission, without debate. without needing the stars to align. This is why some people seem stuck, not because they lack knowledge or resources, but because they've made negotiation their default. They've trained themselves to hesitate, to reconsider, to find reasons why not. And that pattern becomes a prison where every potential action has to pass through an internal bureaucracy that almost always says, not yet. And not yet becomes never, becomes regret, becomes a life that feels like it was lived on pause. The liberation of non-negotiable standards. But here's the beautiful part. When you draw lines, when you make certain things non-negotiable, you don't lose freedom, you gain it. Because freedom isn't having infinite options. Freedom is knowing exactly what you stand for and not having to debate it every morning. You've made the hard choices once, about who you want to be, how you want to live, what matters and what doesn't. And now you're free to execute. Non-negotiable doesn't mean rigid. It means rooted. You're not being inflexible, you're being clear. There's a difference between stubbornly refusing to adapt and refusing to abandon your principles. One is ego, the other is integrity. When you make your morning routine non-negotiable, you're not saying, I'll never adjust this. You're saying, I won't abandon this just because I don't feel like it. That's a crucial distinction, because life will require adjustments. But those adjustments come from wisdom, from changing circumstances, not from negotiating with discomfort. Aristotle taught that we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. But habits can't form if you're constantly renegotiating them. You can't build a habit while simultaneously debating whether you should keep it. Every habit requires a period of non-negotiation, where you just do it, even when it's hard, even when you don't want to, even when it makes no sense in the moment. Because you're building something. You're training your nervous system to accept this as normal. And once it's normal, it's no longer hard. Think about breathing. You don't negotiate with your lungs. Should I take this breath or skip it? It just happens automatically. And that's what happens with non-negotiable commitments. They become automatic. They move from conscious effort to unconscious execution. And that's when transformation happens. Not when you're trying hard, but when you're no longer trying at all. When the action has become part of who you are. What you become. Over time, something remarkable happens. You start to recognize yourself in the mirror, not physically, but spiritually. There's a coherence between who you say you are and who you actually are, between your values and your actions, between your words and your life. And that alignment creates a kind of peace that nothing else can touch. Not success, not validation, not comfort. The peace of knowing you're living with integrity. When you stop negotiating, you become someone who doesn't need external accountability. You don't need apps or coaches or accountability partners to make you show up. You've built an internal compass that's more reliable than any external system. You become self-governing, self-directed, self-sufficient. Not in an isolated way, but in a sovereign way. You're no longer at the mercy of your moods or your environment or your circumstances. You've built something inside that doesn't depend on anything outside. And that's power. People will notice, but they won't always understand. They'll see your consistency, your calm, your results, and they'll attribute it to talent or luck or some advantage you have. But you'll know the real source. You'll know it came from all those moments when you didn't negotiate, when you felt every excuse rise up and you moved anyway. When you honored the commitment, even when no one was watching, even when it would have been easy to skip, even when it didn't seem to matter. That's the compound effect of non-negotiation. It builds a foundation so solid that nothing can shake it. Setbacks don't destroy you because you've trained in consistency. Failure doesn't break you because you know you'll show up tomorrow. Criticism doesn't derail you because your identity isn't based on external validation. It's based on internal integrity, on the promises you keep to yourself when no one else knows. And nothing can take that from you. The practical path forward. So how do you actually stop negotiating? It starts with awareness, with recognizing the negotiations as they happen. Notice when that voice starts. Maybe just this once. I deserve a break. I'll make up for it later. Don't judge it. Don't shame it. Just notice it. Name it. Say to yourself, that's negotiation. And then act anyway. Not from force, but from decision. You've already decided. This isn't up for debate anymore. Start small. Pick one thing, one commitment that you're going to make. Non-negotiable. Maybe it's the first hour of your day. Maybe it's your training schedule. Maybe it's the boundary you set with your time. Whatever it is, declare it. Make it clear. Write it down if you need to. And then, for the next 30 days, honor it without exception, without negotiation. When the voice comes, and it will, acknowledge it, and move anyway. You'll notice something interesting. The negotiations get quieter, not immediately, but gradually, because your subconscious learns that this isn't a debate anymore, that the outcome is already determined, and it stops wasting energy trying to change your mind. That's when the shift happens. That's when action becomes automatic. When you move without thinking, without hesitating, without needing to pump yourself up. Carl Jung reminded us, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Negotiation is often unconscious. It's a pattern you've run for so long, you don't even see it. But when you bring it into the light, when you see it for what it is, a habit of self-betrayal disguised as flexibility, you can change it, not by fighting it, but by replacing it with something stronger, with commitment, with integrity, with the decision to become someone whose word means something, especially to themselves. You'll fail. You'll have days where you slip, where you catch yourself mid-negotiation and you give in. That's not the end. That's feedback. Don't spiral. Don't quit. Don't use one slip as evidence that you're not the kind of person who can do this. Just acknowledge it. Learn from it, and return to the path the next morning. Because discipline isn't perfection. It's return. It's getting back up, faster, with less drama and more grace. The ripple effect. And here's what most people never see coming. When you stop negotiating with yourself, everything else in your life starts to shift. Your relationships improve, because you're not bringing that inner conflict into your interactions. Your work improves, because you're not spending half your energy debating whether to focus. Your peace improves, because you're not carrying the weight of unkept promises to yourself. There's a ripple effect that happens when you build internal integrity. It radiates outward. People respond to it, even if they can't name what they're responding to. They feel the difference between someone who's constantly at war with themselves and someone who's found peace through discipline. One feels unstable, unreliable, uncertain. The other feels solid, dependable, clear. Seneca wrote, "As is a tale, so is life. Not how long it is, but how good it is what matters." And you can't live a good life while constantly negotiating with yourself, while breaking promises to the person who has to live with all your choices. You have to decide what kind of life you want, and then stop debating whether to live it. You have to draw lines, protect them, honor them, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. The truth is this: you already know what you need to do. You've always known. Deep down, beneath the negotiation, beneath the excuses, there's a part of you that's been waiting for you to stop talking and start moving. That part doesn't need motivation. It needs permission. Permission to stop asking. permission to stop debating, permission to just be and act from that being, without justification. When you give yourself that permission, when you eliminate the negotiation table entirely, you'll discover something. You've been carrying a weight you didn't realize was there. The weight of internal division, of constant self-questioning, of never fully committing to anything. And when that weight lifts, when you become one unified force, moving in a single direction, that's when you'll understand what the Stoics meant by inner citadel, by self-command, by the only kingdom that truly matters. Tomorrow morning, when the alarm goes off and that voice starts its familiar negotiation, pause for just one breath and remember, you don't negotiate anymore. You decided who you are. You committed to a path, and now you honor that. Not because it's easy, but because that's what integrity requires. Not because you feel like it, but because you're building something that will outlast every feeling you've ever had. You're building self-trust. You're building internal authority. You're building the kind of character that doesn't bend when life presses. And that character starts here, in the quiet, unglamorous moments, where no one's watching, no one's cheering, and you do it anyway. Stay focused, stay grounded. The quiet work you do in these moments when you refuse to negotiate with yourself is shaping a strength they'll never see coming. Not because you hit it, but because you built it, in silence, in discipline, in the small, sacred space between what you feel and what you choose. And in that space, you're becoming, not someday, not eventually, right now, with every choice that refuses to be negotiated.